Welcome, everybody. I'm joined today by Chadd Castrilli. Really excited to get his take on all things home improvement. So, Chadd, with that, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
So I've been in the industry for almost 20 years now, and I'm currently the Vice President of Sales for Dream Home Roofers.
20 years.
Mm-hmm. Long
You
time.
look like you're 25.
I started when I was 5. I get that a lot.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about Dream Home. What do you guys do?
So Dream Home is, we just celebrated our third anniversary, so the company's 3 years old.
Nice.
And
So you're at that walking, talking stage.
Yes.
Terrible. Yeah.
It's, what's interesting is, for the age that they are, there's still some growing pains.
Sure.
It still feels very, like a startup.
Yeah.
But the volume, the quality, it feels like the business has been there for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
So good systems and processes, but we're focused exclusively on roofing, and we're an Owens Corning Platinum preferred contractor with them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And just quickly, like a breakdown on the products and stuff that you sell. I know you mentioned roofing. What's that breakdown look like?
So they offer 2 architectural shingles, the Oak Ridge, which is more of the drop product, a little bit more cost effective. It's still a lifetime architectural shingle. And then the Duration, which is their premium shingle and probably one of the best architectural shingles in the market.
Yeah. When you say like drop, what does that mean? Like you're leading with a better shingle and you're dropping to one when price is a concern, or?
Yeah. And if they're going to be in there in a short period of time,
Okay.
Both shingles are rated for lifetime, but one package has more of like a prorated warranty than the other. So if somebody's going to be in the house for just a couple of years, or if they're just on a really tight budget, whereas, the other package, if they really want the best of the best, they want, the premium colors, the high definition, then they would go with that Duration package.
I'm going to jump into kind of our first topic here. Interested in learning more about when you got started in building a sales team. Mm-hmm. So what was it like when you first started managing a sales team? Were you guys using paper? What was the whole process like?
Oh, yeah.
How long ago was that?
I got into management probably about 14 years ago.
Okay. All right. So yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, it was carbon copy.
Yeah. Press hard, 3 copies, right? Like
DC is 3 copies. Okay. The surrounding states were 2, and the sales reps would always bring back the wrong copy.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, sorry, you got to drive back out, give them the other copy, get the correct copy, and bring it back. The price guide was a 1-inch binder with laminated pages. Same thing with the pitch book. Yeah. And if you had to make a change for your pitch book, like I remember lining up 10 sales reps. I'm like, all right, turn to page 37, pull 1 page out, and then move all of the other pages up 1 page to get this new page to fit. So it was, it worked, but it's very different than obviously what we do today.
How many appointments were they able to run?
Back then?
Yeah.
1, maybe 2.
Yeah.
One of the interesting components is, just that what the tech allows you to do, especially with financing, is back then you would just get a credit application filled out and you'd say, hey, I'd be back tomorrow or the next day if you got an answer. Mm-hmm. And you drive all the way back out there just to get the paperwork signed, which means you're not running an additional appointment.
Yeah. And what did it mean for a sales rep that, didn't get all the signatures on that form and they're having to drive back? Are they doing that on their own time, or they're out an appointment that day, or like what is that? What was the implication for them?
Normally you have to take them off of an additional appointment, right? Because they're, the sales reps, outside reps in the industry generally work, 5-6 days a week. They're pulling, long days, 8-10 hours. So unless they felt like doing it on a Sunday, you're effectively taking them off an appointment in the future to go correct the mistake or get the loan doc signed. And there were plenty of paperwork mistakes to go correct.
I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
What was their response when you'd have to bring them in to update the price guide or to swap out resources? Was that just like on a standard weekly sales meeting that you would do all that in?
Yes. Yeah. And it took up half of the sales meeting. So it was productive in a sense that you're updating your pitch book or your price guide, but it was unproductive in the sense that you taught your sales team nothing during that period of time. Yeah. And a good sales meeting is either motivating or you gave them a tool to use today. And if you're just flipping through paperwork, you did neither.
Yeah. Did you ever have sales reps that would use the wrong sell sheet or like the wrong What was the?
Absolutely.
Do you have any stories about that?
It was usually something to do with like a discontinued product or a
Okay.
discontinued color. Worst case scenario is if there was like a price guide update and they sold it, they feel good about selling it. They sold it based on the numbers that,
I can see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So plenty of challenges associated with
Yeah.
that.
So they ended up selling something that wasn't available, and that not probably affected their morale. One, but like.
Oh yeah.
And the profitability, the margin on that job, they feel like they had a winner and then they end up losing. What was how did the business respond to those type of things where maybe they sold the wrong product or the wrong color or discontinued?
I mean, you just try to embrace it and support them because half of the time it was the rep's fault and half of the time it was the business's fault.
Yeah.
And the worst case scenario is when it affects the customer. And, they fell in love with some particular color or feature or product that's no longer there. And you go back and you're like, hey, I know I told you this is the best thing since sliced bread. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Can I offer you something different? And that's very difficult. It's a poor customer experience.
Did you ever do that?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. It's an interesting transition from sales to management. But yes, certainly.
I feel the pain. I remember one time I was measuring a roof. And like the lady was she's like got out her checkbook, like ready to cut me a check. And I'm like, something's not right. Something's not right. Come to find out, like I missed a whole section of the roof. And I'm like, whenever you get those impressions from homeowners, it's like, oh, what did I forget or what did I miss? Mm-hmm. What about training? Like what was training like back then? And what is it like for you today? And we were talking beforehand, you're continuing to hire more and more salespeople. Like what did training look like 14 years ago, and what does it look like today? Mainly in the essence of like how technology played a role in it.
Yeah, so training back then was very much on like a 1-to-1 ratio. Mm-hmm. So you would bring one salesperson on, you would sit down with them, and you try to train them everything start to finish, and then get them out in the field. Now, you can hire, depending on the way that the training's formatted. Our goal is to bring on 10 salespeople every single month.
Okay.
And we can do that with one corporate sales trainer. And then the other thing is with the technology, it doesn't all have to be instructor-led. So, that instructor can be more efficient because they can lean into these resources. The salesperson can take their iPad home and the resources section's filled with all these training modules and recordings and videos so they can continue to kind of self-improve even if they're not in the office in front of the corporate trainer.
So they're using, just an interesting note there, like you're using that resource section for both internal and external resources. Talk a little bit more about that because I know a lot of folks use it, and we're talking about SalesPro customers, but like a lot of folks use that for external purposes, like they've got their manufacturer brochures or company story, those type of things. But you have an internal thing too. Like when and where and how do sales reps use that?
Yeah, so it was, I'd like to say it was done like very much on purpose or intentionally. I think the moment that I realized that we could do that, because the opportunity was right there. But when we realized that we could do that, I mean, we really leaned into it. So, a recording of every single part of the sales pitch, a video of every single part of the sales pitch, resource sections for, financing options and things of that nature. So it has fundamentally changed that resource section, and I would venture to guess that 50% of it is for training.
That's great. Do they ever use it like when they're at the kitchen table or like with the customer, or are they using this when they go home at night and like looking for refreshers? Or is there things in there where it's like, hey, follow step A, step B, step C, and maybe they need a reference on what step B is?
They could. I would venture to guess that often they are just using it as a, not a customer-facing tool, so just when they are at home.
Yeah.
But the goal I think for training is to keep it so simple that they're not in the middle of their sales pitch thinking, well, what do I do next?
Yeah. What are some of the things that you had trained on back then that you don't train on today because of technology?
Measuring would be probably the biggest one.
Okay.
And I remember, taking, a 1 to 2 week training class, and 30 to 50% of it was how to measure a roof. Yeah. Drip edge, waste factor, the whole nine.
Yeah.
And now maybe we spend an hour on that in a week.
And that's because you taught your people how to just do a rough measurement, right?
Yeah.
Because if I remember right, they're getting a rough measurement, counting like what they can see, like pipe boots and those type of things. coming up with a price, and then your team's ordering a measurement report on the production side.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah. So, the way I was kind of raised in the industry once the tech came out was the sales reps are responsible for measuring absolutely everything. Mm-hmm. Drip edge, starter, hip and ridge. And then, if you want a salesperson to do that, you obviously have to put a ton of training into it. And I think the goal there is that they're kind of quasi-project managers.
Sure.
And that's a very rare bird, that somebody is going to be that proficient in construction and that proficient in sales. Mm. And when you look at the people that you would generally hire in the industry, they don't have this industry experience, construction experience, roofing experience. Sometimes they don't even have sales experience.
Yeah.
So how do I enable the recruiting department to cast a wide enough net that I can bring in people that can be good at it, and I can do it in a fashion that's scalable?
It's a great segue. Interested in diving in more about that. So who is the persona that you're hiring? You're hiring for sales reps, but are you hiring folks that were doing sales for another company, maybe selling windows or siding? Or are you looking for a teacher or the bartender or the service guy at a repair shop? Who are you looking for?
Yeah, I think most hiring managers would love to hire the best rep from the competitor, right? And not to say that doesn't work, because it does, but there are far and few between of those folks, right? Mm-hmm. That's, again, pretty rare bird. So we want to hire on behavior. When I'm doing an interview, I'm basically trying to decide, if this person was sitting down at my kitchen table with my wife and I, would they hold my attention? Would I believe them? And ultimately, would I give them $20,000 2 to 3 hours after meeting them? And it doesn't matter if you worked at a competitor or what you did before that. That's a personality trait, and that's pretty inherent in that individual. It's frankly probably not something you can really teach. So if you're looking for that, I think you can, again, cast a little bit of a wider net. So
what are you seeing, from trend-wise? Where are you getting candidates from? What type of previous jobs or professions did they have?
It's usually some sort of, customer-facing, whether they're in hospitality, they're a bartender or a waiter. I really like when the folks, A, engaged with customers, mm-hmm. B, had some small component of variable income, work atypical hours, and then when you offer them the ability to say, hey, you can make X amount of money, but 80% of it is variable, and you've got to work nights and weekends to do it, and you've got to drive 30,000 miles a year to do it. That doesn't sound appealing to a ton of people.
Yeah.
But you think of a few industries where they would say, well, that sounds wonderful. If I can make X dollar amount, I will do those 3 things, and they won't bother me.
Yeah.
And then that person becomes what I like to say is the Kool-Aid man. They're like, I'll just run through walls, tell me how to make X dollar amount, and I'll do it. You hire a top rep from another market, and they're like, well, I really don't like to work nights. You're like, I know, we talked about it. It's part of the job. Yeah. And you're going to talk about it for the rest of their career.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I say it because when I started, the only reason I got into sales was because I had started out as a laborer, learned how to install, mm-hmm. did some subcontracting, was a project manager. Mm-hmm. And then I had the kind of prerequisites to know how to do measurements and how to price out a project and that kind of thing. So I learned the sales side of it and got into sales. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is that now people don't need to have that background. They don't need to know all that, because you're able to, one, you get technology in their hands that mm-hmm. cuts down some of that, but also the way that you price and the way that you do things, you can train anybody to do it without needing that background. So I want to talk for a minute about, we mentioned to measure, you're getting a rough measurement, let's call it, counting the things on the roof mm-hmm. and coming up with a price. Talk to us about how do you price out a roofing project? Because I know yours is more simplified than saying, how many nails do I need? How many staples do mm-hmm. I need? How many rolls of ice and water? All those things. So how do you price it and why?
So the goal is simple, scalable, repeatable, right? So if you look at, the folks that we want to hire, and again, casting that big net, I want to be able to hire somebody from whatever industry, say they were a bartender. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to put them through 6 to 12 months of training to make them a project manager. So I'm going to train them for, 2 to 4 weeks. And then when they're out in the field, I don't want to require them to tell me how many feet of starter strip are there when you can't see it.
Yeah.
right? Like, what's the waste factor on this roof because of X, Y, Z? Oh, it's different. Everybody's got a different opinion. So our price guide consists of maybe a half a dozen items. Most things kind of roll up to, the square, right? So price per square on the roof. And then I want them to be able to identify the things that they can see from the ground, right? So, what's the pitch of the roof? Obviously, that's pretty important when it comes to pricing. How many pipe collars, how many chimneys, how many skylights, everything else effectively goes into the price per square.
How many items total are you tracking to come up with that price?
I would say that there's probably maybe as many as 10 line items, but 90% of the time, 3 to 5 of them are being used.
Okay. So that's all you need for price. How do you, are your margins consistent, or are they all over the place because of that? Or how do you reconcile that?
The margins are very consistent, and that's effectively just controlled through the pricing and the price drops that are in SalesPro.
Okay.
So it's pretty rare that somebody will be under measured. And if that happens, it obviously impacts their commission, which mitigates, margin erosion.
Yeah. Do they tend to round up when they're estimating?
We monitor it very closely,
Okay.
because the other side of that coin is, if you go out and you bid a job and you're 20% over, if you get the job, people can be happy with that. But the real challenge is the one where you're 20% over and you don't get it, because you'll never get that feedback. Well, okay, if I was 20% less, maybe I would have got the job. So we're constantly monitoring the measurements from the reps. And then once the job is sold and it goes into production, they order a measurement report. And then we verify the measurement report against their measurements. And what I'm looking for them to be is within 1 to 2 squares.
Okay.
So if they're plus or minus 1 to 2 squares, we have got that built in to our price guide. We've got it built into our margins. It's healthy, and again, it's very scalable.
And then when it comes to the ordering side of the business, are they using what the sales rep did? I know we mentioned that they're ordering a measurement report. Are they just building a material list off of that and going?
Yes.
How do you reconcile?
You usually don't use what the sales reps measured unless there's a question, something's missing, something's different. Then they might go back and they might look at the estimate. They're obviously going to look at the contract. So I'd say that would happen a minority of the time. It all effectively gets reconciled through the sales manager, right? So, hey, this job was over or under more than 1 or 2 squares. There's a training opportunity here. Let's prevent that from happening again in the future.
Out of curiosity, what's the number one thing that you need to get right when building a sales team?
Ooh, culture.
Culture.
Yeah. So, I think every sales manager that's been in any industry, if they've got 2 or 3 years under their belt, they've probably experienced, a wide variety of salespeople. And you have your reps that are generally really good employees, but they don't close as high, or the really high closers and their paperwork is bad. And I think the worst of the bunch is the folks that close really high. They're very profitable for the organization, but they're very toxic for the culture. And I think it's easy to make excuses for that individual. They're just not good with people, but just stay away from them because they're a good salesperson. And I like to consider a rule, no butt heads.
Nice.
So
is that on the wall?
I should. It's currently not, and I might use a different word than butthead. But even if you're a top rep, if you're just not a good teammate, and you're not good with our customers and customer follow-up, and I don't mean that it's just not your strong suit. If you don't care about it, if it's not in your DNA to go out of your way to help a teammate or to help a customer, I'm not interested in what your performance is. And that kind of goes back to hiring. You're hiring on behavior. Why does everybody that work at Chick-fil-A, why are they so nice? It's not, I assure you it's in the training, but you can't train that to everybody, right? That comes down to the candidate profile, recruiting, and, interviewing.
Yeah. How long is the sales training process?
4 weeks.
4 weeks. And when, just walk me through at a high level, what are the phases of that?
First week is classroom training.
Okay.
So that's very formal, instructor-led. Second week is on-the-job training. Okay. You're going to be doing shadows. Third week is a hybrid of that OJT, running just a couple of leads yourself to get that real-world experience and to put some context behind the training and to really see, well, what are you good at and where do you need help? And then the fourth week, maybe you're running a 75% full schedule, and then we can continue to give the individual personalized training around those kind of initial results. Mm-hmm. And then once they hit their fifth week, floodgates open, they're running a full schedule, and then we'll bring them back in after 90 days to do a review.
Okay, nice. Mm-hmm. When are you handing them the iPad?
Day one of training.
Day one? Yeah. And then
you effectively can't not if you lean into SalesPro and use it for training in that resource section, because that's when they go home, that's where they're going to refer back to it.
Got it. So you've got all your training material in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. Awesome. We talked a little bit about the simplified pricing
mm-hmm.
Model. I just want to go back to it for a second. Like, I think it's interesting because you'll hear a lot of folks that like want to account for every little thing,
mm-hmm.
and you guys don't, and a lot of other companies don't as well, right? They have their sales processes is A, and the ordering project management side is B, and those two don't need to be one-to-one. But if you can just expand a little bit more about why you guys chose to go that route as opposed to listing everything in there.
So where I came from previously, we would measure everything down to the finest detail. So, I've never installed a roof. I'm not an installer. Kudos to those folks for really keeping the industry moving. But I can look at a roof and I can tell you, how many squares it is, what's the pitch, how many, feet of starter I need. I mean, I can give you a general idea, mm-hmm. right? And that's because that's how I was kind of, born and raised in the industry. But even when you do that, the production department generally still is just going to order their measurement report and verify everything.
Yeah.
So they're generally still not going to go back and use the salesperson's measurements because they need to be sure it's in their hands at that point. It's their responsibility to make sure it's good to go. And ordering an Eagle View or a Hover or something like that, you get nearly everything you need. And if you get a ton of photos, it's like the project manager is there on site, right? So you can do that stuff pretty virtually. And I just remember how difficult it was to train people on measurements. I mean, again,
even when leveraging a third party to pull those in.
Yes, because the third party, I mean, it could be like, what if the pitch is a 312, right? Like, what type of install can I do? Do I need to add some sort of intake ventilation, right? Like a Hover or an Eagle View is not going to tell you if the roof is properly ventilated.
Yeah.
And so you're putting so much responsibility on the salesperson that you're attempting to make them a project manager. And that's just very difficult to have one person do both.
Do you think it also shortens, for me, it shortened my time in home, right? So like before I'm like getting all these measurements, very detailed, estimate, and I'm spending, if I'm really good, like 45 minutes. Normally I'm not, so it's like an hour plus, right? But like all that time to do all that work, and then you're getting in at the kitchen table. Like, how long are you guys spending putting together an estimate and doing that? Like, what's that sales process look like?
Putting together like the measurements to create the estimate?
Coming up with the price.
5 minutes?
5 minutes.
10 minutes, tops. So it's just, it's kind of like each department or each individual, like what do you want them to be specialized in? And so salespeople, we know what we want them to be specialized in. It's selling. So can the rest of the organization function without, at a high level, can they function without relying on the salesperson to provide exquisite measurements? And the answer is you definitely can. Like we are doing it. I'm sure other companies are doing it as well. So if you don't need them to, then why are you attempting to get them to?
It's a great question. Yeah.
I'm waiting for your answer.
Yeah, I don't have one. That's why you're in the hot seat, not me. Yeah. All right, so they show up at the home. Walk me through what's that process look like? They show up, then what?
Yep. So it's a very simple selling process, right? I've been in the industry for so long that I'd love to just transfer 2 decades of information for every rep. But again, think about if you want to scale the business, then what is your clientele that you're recruiting? And so it's just a very simple process, right? So we want to make sure that the customer needs a roof. We understand what type of roof they need, and we can kind of show them empirically that, hey, I know you were looking for a free estimate or a free inspection. Here's the evidence that I found. It's effectively third-party, unbiased, because it's on your roof. Here are the photos. Here are the images. Here's the description of what's missing. And so we start out with just an inspection. The goal there is to show them that now you know you need a roof. Then you move on to why you would want the roof from us, why you would want the products we're offering. And then when we go to present price, like a lot of times you hear in the industry, price conditioning. For me as a leader in the sales department, I want homeowners to purchase from us because they know everything. All stones are unturned. They're like, this is what I want. Right? It lowers cancellation. It increases customer satisfaction. So before you go into presenting price, educate your customer on what else could they get out there. What do you get if it's somebody that's less expensive? Because not everybody that's less expensive is, a liar and a cheater and a thief, right? No. There's plenty of that all over, regardless of price point. But just what would you get for it? What do you get if you buy a Kia? What do you get if you buy a Mercedes? It doesn't mean that the Mercedes is better than the Kia. The Kia is far better than the Mercedes at being price effective. So just what does that homeowner want? And then at the end, if what they want is what you're offering, there's a perfect alignment. So that transparency part, the transparency in the work, the transparency in the price, I think that kind of breaks down a lot of barriers because homeowners naturally, I think, don't trust salespeople.
Yeah.
So how do you give them as much third-party facts and evidence that they can see for their own eyes that's not just a salesperson saying, hey, buying this roof is good for you and it's good for me.
Mm-hmm. And so just to get a little more granular, they're doing all of that and then they're putting together a price, or they put together the price afterwards, or when are they putting together that price? When do they come up with it?
So they would do the inspection first. So exterior, interior inspection. They'd go through the company story. They'd go through the product demo. Then they would put the price together. Then they would go through the scope of work. Then they would present price.
Okay. And are they doing that in front of the homeowner, or they are? Okay.
Because you'll have homeowners say like, no, my roof's not, it's rare, but you'll have homeowners say, no, my roof's not 20 square, it's 15. And you're like, if you're already there in the conversation, you're probably doomed.
Yeah.
You want to show the homeowner like, here's why it is 20 squares, even if they're thinking my roof's 15.
Sure.
You show them it's 20, and if they have a question or a comment or a concern, you can work through it together.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, we said we're going to exclude this section. Oh, well, then it is 15. Or, oh, I didn't know you had pitch than waist.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Zillow says my home's 1594.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, but you have
20.
You got a 12-12 pitch with a 3-foot soffit overhang. You're
right.
like, not going to be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so then let's say customer, homeowner says yes, they want to move forward. Mm-hmm. Then what?
So at that point, the sales rep would, if they're going to go with financing, we would complete a credit application, send that off to the banks. Then we would move on to the contract. We'd fill the contract out. We'd complete the contract. And before you sign it, go over every single line item with that homeowner so that there's no surprises. I'm a big fan of if someone's surprised and it's not their birthday, they're probably not going to be happy about it. Make sure there's no surprises.
Yeah.
And then sign your loan documents. And then at that point, our sales reps will call into the office and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones just joined the family. And then somebody from our concierge department would, again, go line item over that contract, make sure everything's good to go, and then schedule the install.
Such a fancy term. Like, I just want to work in that department.
What?
The concierge
Yes.
department.
What's interesting is you actually hear that word a lot.
Yeah.
But it's usually it's not backed up by a lot, right? So you go to a hotel and there's, concierge, like, what they're going to do and how they're going to help you. It's very different in action than in title.
Yeah.
And the action behind what we do is phenomenal.
Now, is there any, I'm asking this because I've heard of other companies that do this, but is there any upselling that takes place at that point? From the salesperson or from concierge? After sales from the concierge.
Not generally, no.
Okay.
Yeah. So the salesperson, they can upgrade from package A to package B, or they can add, gutters and trim. But again, we are pretty singularly focused on roofing, just simple, scalable, repeatable. I don't have to train my rep on 5 products. I don't have to train project managers on 5 products. And I don't have to try to keep 5 different installers busy.
Yeah. 1 call close or 2 call close?
What's a 2 call close?
There's your
1
answer.
call close. Yes.
If are you asking for both homeowners to be home, or what's your take?
No.
You'll sell to one. It's called a one-legger.
Yes.
You'll run one-leggers. Any like pre-qualification that's happening on the phone, or
Absolutely.
Okay, what's that like?
So they're looking to make sure that there is a general need for an inspection, right? So your roof is of a certain age. It doesn't have certain components on there. Like we don't want to get into removing and reinstalling solar panels, for instance. Asbestos. Yeah. No one wants to get into that.
Yeah. Cedar shake. You guys run into cedar shake?
Yeah, we do. We'll remove cedar shake, metal, slate, redeck the roof, and then put, asphalt shingles on there. So that's perfectly within our wheelhouse. We don't do flat roofing, so we're not doing like torch down or EPDM. So we want to make sure that that's obviously not what they're looking for. And so if it meets that criteria and they can give us, a short bit of time, and they'll agree to be home. And obviously we'd like both homeowners to be home, but we don't require it. So our goal is to schedule it when we think they'll be home.
Okay.
But we won't tell them we're not coming if your spouse isn't there. That does not go over quite well.
Yeah.
And so that's the level of qualification.
That's great. What happens if a sales rep doesn't close it on that first call, but there's an opportunity maybe for a rehash? How do you guys handle that?
Goes to a different department.
Okay.
Yep. So the sales reps are tip of the spear. Generally speaking, they have the highest compensation package. And my goal for them is to keep them looking through the windshield versus looking in the rearview mirror. Anybody that's been in sales management is probably talked to a rep or like, oh, I know they're going to call me back. And people do, but it's probably 5% of the time or less. And if a salesperson feels that way 70% of the time, well, that means that they're wrong vast majority of the time. And think about all the energy and effort and the mindset behind focusing on a deal that's not going to come to fruition.
Yeah.
So move on. I'll give you 3 more leads tomorrow. And then, we'll have somebody in a different department follow up. And the other thing I don't think people realize is like I've been on the road. It's not safe to ask a salesperson to continue to follow up with homeowners. When are they doing it? When they're in the house with a new homeowner or when they're driving?
Right.
I assure you it's when they're driving. There's not a ton of downtime. They don't have an office. They're usually using their phone or an iPad. They're not going to be as diligent in the CRM. So it's just, I don't think that's effective. Sometimes it can be difficult for the salespeople, right? Like, oh no, that person really was going to call me back. Maybe they were. Here's 3 more leads.
I like it. You talked about lending in the sales process. Are you offering that every time? I mean, talk to me a little bit about how lending is incorporated in the business.
Absolutely. So it's offered every single time. And right now, I'd say we're probably financing 80% of our work. If you're with a good banking partner, a good banking partner is one that has your back, right? And they treat you well. But I would say, a lot of people put focus on things like dealer fees. Like first focus is, will you just say yes to the credit app?
Yeah, approvals.
Approvals, right? And then it's the workflow, dealer fee. And the workflow, I mean, how simple and convenient it is for the salesperson to process. And then also production. If I've got a change order, or I want to get funded, can I click a button post-install with a signed completion certificate, COC? Can I click a button and get paid in 24 hours? And, a lot of banks these days, especially ones integrated in SalesPro, that the workflow is awesome. You get paid near instantly. And I think it's a really nice vote of confidence for the homeowner to say, hey, this third party, the bank, they're going to hold the money.
Yeah. And
when I uphold my end of the bargain, they'll pay me, and then your monthly payments will go directly to them.
What do you say? I know in roofing, it's very low, the amount of people that offer financing, where in Windows and HVAC, it's super high. It's like over 50, 70% of the jobs are financed. Roofing, I think the last stat I heard was somewhere around like 7%. So low. And the thing I usually hear from people is like, oh, my customers don't need financing. Like, what is your take on that?
I don't want to be like crass, but I think it's absurd. Most people don't buy things in cash, right? Most people don't buy their cell phones in cash. They don't buy their cars. They certainly don't buy their houses. So, if you have a cash customer, wonderful, you want to be able to support them. But let's say you have a cash customer who has good cash flow, but maybe perhaps doesn't have the money saved up. Okay, well, here's a 12-month same as cash where you can kind of amortize the expense over 12 months. You're still a cash customer. You paid no interest. So cash financing, it works for your cash customers that actually can stroke a check. And it also works for everybody else. And the everybody else is a vast majority of America. Name someone that you know that's like, oh, this person, they can definitely write a check for $20,000 without blinking an eye. So you just shrunk your pool of customers, massively.
Yeah. I find it mind blowing too, but I always like to hear what
it's mind boggling.
Yeah,
it really
what other
is.
people's responses. So you're leading with it, right? Like, are you leading with $20,000? Or are you leading with $349 a month or whatever the payment might be?
Start with payment.
Okay.
Yep. So we're focused on monthly payment. Again, 80% or more of our customers are financing, so that's what they're focused on. But you focus on monthly payment, and if the customer says, no, I don't want to finance, I'd like to pay cash, you're like, oh, okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But you lead with the monthly payment because it's a vast majority of how Americans are going to pay for a large home improvement project or large purchase in general.
And getting a little granular, like, are you offering multiple payment options based on different plans, whether it's a promotional price or a low monthly payment? Like, are you giving multiple options?
We are, but again, just like the price guide, keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
If you look at a finance matrix from a bank, is usually 30, 40, 50 options on there. And I've been there and done that where I just handed it over to the sales manager and the sales team. And it's like death by decision, right? Like they are just...
Cheesecake Factory, I call it.
It is.
I walk in thinking I want
menu.
A burger.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, I'm like, do I want salmon? Do I want
a
orange
gyro?
chicken?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So, having been there, done that, I got to look at the results and analyze the results and notice that, well, even if the team has full access to the finance matrix, you'll find a massive concentration of usage around a few programs. And so we focus on those programs, the ones that are popular to the reps and the customers. I want to, have some degree of control over dealer fees because sometimes they can get out of control. And I want programs, frankly, that multiple banks offer. So a unique program from a unique bank is a little difficult because if that bank says no, then I have to go to the customer and say, sorry, that option's not available. Let me resell you. Sorry, your color's not available from my paper price guide. Let me resell you. Like, I don't want to have to do that. So if I can have 3 banks offering relatively similar, 6 similar programs, if one bank says no and I go to the next bank, no sweat.
Yeah. You mentioned there are 3 banks. Why 3? Why not just have one lender that you work with?
So there's a few lenders that have had longstanding relationships with, and I really like the company and what they do and the people there. But there is no one bank that's great at everything. There is not. So if you go with a major lender and you put all your eggs in that basket, I would promise you that if you went with another major lender where they buy just as deep and they offer just the same thing, one bank's turndowns, the other bank will pick up 10 to 15% of them. And it's just because the algorithms are just that nuanced in their differences. Maybe one bank pulls from TransUnion, one bank pulls from Equifax, maybe one bank does a tri-merge, maybe one bank takes household income. I mean, it gets really confusing. So it's like, okay, we're going to have a few banks that we really like, that give us high approval rates, that treat us well, that pay us fast, and have low dealer fees. And we are going to give it to each one. And whoever says yes, we're happy to give the business to.
And you're not, so you're saying like 2 banks that are, let's say, prime lenders, but then you also have, for simplicity, we'll say like near prime and subprime. Like you have other banks as well, right? That'll buy deeper.
Correct. Okay.
So it's not just in an even line there of, hey, we want multiple prime, lenders. We want ones that'll buy deep.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. And I would say, one to three prime lenders and a secondary and a tertiary is a pretty good setup.
Awesome. And what does this look like for you in SalesPro? Like, do you have monthly payments in your proposal, and then you're submitting financing through SalesPro? Can you talk through what that process looks like for you guys?
Yeah, so the monthly payment is on our pricing sheet that we give to the homeowner before you start negotiating. It's obviously on the contract. Once they agree and they move forward, you're going to submit a credit application effectively to Dream Home Roofers. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get a copy to store in our CRM. And then for the salesperson, once they complete that quote unquote default credit app, then they just click a button to the next bank. 95% of the data imports over. They pop in a couple of line items, hit submit. And you're like to your favorite bank. If your favorite bank says no, you go to your second favorite. They say no, you go to your third favorite, and you just go until you get a yes.
That's awesome. What's the most important thing for you when choosing a bank? You mentioned a couple of things like dealer fees, fundability, I think like ease of use or ease of doing business with them. Like how would you stack rank those? Like what are the three most important things?
I would say that predictability is actually the most important. I get calls and emails and texts and LinkedIn, this, that, and the others from banks all the time. Hey, we've got wonderful programs, no dealer fees. Okay, well, let's see if you're around in 3 to 5 years, because I've been there where a bank goes under and you've got tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars out on the street. That's challenging to the business. So I want a well-established bank where their rate sheets aren't constantly changing and their workflow is not constantly changing. I don't want to have to manage the bank. That's not what I want to do. So if I'm confident that they're predictable, then after that it would be approval rates. So just say yes as often as you possibly can. After the approval rate, it would be the workflow, and a big component of that workflow is how quickly will you pay me when the job is done? If I hand you a document signed by the customer saying that they are happy and satisfied and the work is complete, and I hand it to you on a Tuesday, do I get paid on a Wednesday or do I get paid the following Friday?
Yeah.
And that can be challenging to cash flow if there's a bunch of hoops to jump through and it takes them a long time. And then lastly would be dealer fees. If you approved 100% of my credit applications and you paid me very quickly, but your dealer fees were high, I'd be like, I will figure that out. I can't figure out how to get a yes from a bank that said no.
Yeah. Awesome. I know that you guys are expanding, you're growing. So I know for you, like scalability is important. Mm-hmm. Talk through like how has SalesPro impacted you in that ability to scale and grow the team?
I would say it has become, nearly the central nervous system. I mean, it certainly is for the sales department, but now the other departments are really embracing it. So they're looking to get the data out of SalesPro that the sales reps are putting into it. And it really connects each department so that they're not siloed. And when you do that, like we maintain, a single price guide throughout. So if prices go up, we can change it in there. I don't have to change it per market. I don't have to change it on this spreadsheet and that spreadsheet. I think it's just like operating in one ecosystem where everything's communicating with each other versus this CRM, that point of sale software, this bank's app. Like that's my favorite thing back to bank. Like we have a great app. I'm like, I don't want it. So just being able to operate in one place, you get very familiar with it, right? Like going back to hiring a bartender 30 days ago that's selling roofing today, I'd like them to just operate in one app where they can really get to know it and they can almost become like a subject matter expert in the app.
Yeah.
I know where to go and to do everything, and I'm not constantly getting new apps from new banks and new partners and new this, that, and the other.
When you're hiring a new sales rep, like what is their impression when you do hand them an iPad and they're leveraging that? Like, are they expecting that, or is it new to them, or like what is their take?
Generally speaking, they're blown away by it, right?
Really?
So there are some industries that have similar very useful apps. Yeah. But it's just the quantity of things that are in SalesPro and the quality of things that are in there. I would say it's unrivaled in the industry, and then it is probably unrivaled in other industries as well.
Have you had any sales reps join you that may have come from another company that didn't use SalesPro?
Absolutely.
And what was their impression? Like going from, whatever they were using before to using this?
The general feedback is that it is more simple, more intuitive, and usually more robust.
Yeah. And I didn't ask you this earlier, but like how long do your reps stay in the home?
I would say that it's probably 90 to 120 minutes would be the average.
And are you asking for that up front? I know you said like you asked for a small amount of time, or I forget the verbiage. Do you put a time frame around that? Like, hey, we'd like to talk to you for 2 hours. Can you carve out 2 hours? Or
we put a time frame on. It's not as long as our average time in the house. Okay. The amount of time that we ask for the homeowner is the amount of time that we need to complete our inspection and really go over our value proposition. Yeah. So if at the end of that, it's just a hard no, then, hey, we asked you for that amount of time. We honored it, right? We're not stretching it. Yeah. But if they're like, oh, this looks interesting, let's talk about it. Okay, well, we've already honored the amount of time we asked for. If you would like to talk about it and continue moving forward, let's do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some common pitfalls that you see other sales teams or sales reps running into?
I would say that generally speaking, the sales manager or a sales leader is trying to turn their sales reps into them, and they're trying to do it too quickly. So if I hired a salesperson, let's say I start my own business tomorrow, and the first thing I'm going to do is hire a sales rep. There's a big part of me that wants to teach them everything I know. Right, because if you know everything I know, you're probably going to go out there and do really well, right? Right? You can talk about every component of roofing and all the competitors and the history of. They overcomplicate it, right? Because the salesperson, if you give them things that are very simple, the beauty in that is that they can be very proficient in those simple things. I got a bartender from 30 days ago. He's out selling roofing today, and he has nearly mastered my simple approach. Is it the approach that I would take if I hired a 17-year veteran? No, I'd want them to do more. Yeah. So just kind of like, how do you eat an elephant, small bites at a time. Mm-hmm. It's hard to just enter an industry and have 10,000 hours under your belt. So I would say they overcomplicate it. You'll look at sales training. It's like, here are the 15 objections that come up and the best way to overcome them. Okay, they're going to be terrible at all 15. Or you can give them 3. The top 3, and they feel canned and robotic, and you're like, just memorize them and be excellent at them. And if you carry that same kind of KISS approach through training and management, it's like, all right, now you've grown, right? Everybody that does an interview, a hiring manager always hears the word growth, which is awesome. But I think people misconstrue that. It's, I want you to grow in place until you've mastered what you have. And if there's more for me to give you in the position you have, I want you to then master that, then that, then that, until I don't have anything more to give you in that role. Then you can grow into a new role. Yeah. So just overcomplication.
Makes sense. That's great. How are you able to maintain your talent and not have them get poached or help them grow, mature within the organization?
I would say you have really high expectations and you hold them to that. And when they are doing that, you treat them like gold and you overpay them. And if you talk to a business owner or a CFO, they're always trying to, find a better way to make the company healthier and more profitable. And generally speaking, a lower comp plan can help achieve that. But that's, to me, short-sighted. I think if you were to call one of our reps and say, hey, we've got a job for you over here at XYZ Roofing, they're unlikely to entertain that call, and it's because we treat them very well, and I want to overpay them.
It reminds me of that expression, I don't know if you've heard this, where it's like, what happens if you teach them and they leave? Mm-hmm. It's like, what happens if you don't and they stay?
It's the CFO versus the CEO. I've seen that before. Yeah. Like, no, I want to make them wonderful. And if they do want to move on and, like, let's say open their own business, because I think a lot of like roofing companies are started by like a top rep or a top project manager, and they want to do their own thing. Doing your own thing is a million times more difficult than saying, okay, well, if you'd like to go do your own thing, why don't you go open up a new office for us and we'll support you. Yeah. I'll get you your candidates. I'll get you your leads. I'll do your install. I'll do your accounting. I'll do your HR. if you're coming from a sales background, just interview, hire, train, coach, like focus on that, and you can have your own shop.
Yeah. It's great. All right, Chadd, I know you're not a fan of the two-call close, but why do you think it's such a heated debate, and you have companies that stand so firmly on we one-call close, or no, we don't believe in that, we two-call close, or take a consultative approach, or whatever they might say, right? Like, why do you think that's such a contested or heated question?
It's usually the way that the person kind of was introduced into the industry, and frankly, I would tell you that they're both wrong. Right, a one-call close and a two-call close, it's not the right approach. The people that do a two-call close don't like the one-call close because they think it's high-pressure sales. And the people that do a two-call close, those one-call close people view them as like, well, that's a waste of time. It's not necessary, and you're leaving deals on the table. You can have your cake and eat it too. You have a team that does a one-call close, and if they are not successful, they move on to continue to do one-call closes, and you have a team that then follows up, right? And you make sure that your sales process and your comp plan is not designed for high-pressure sales, right? It's not about smoke and mirrors. Again, like I said earlier, lay everything out on the table, all of the facts, and if the homeowner looks at those and says, this is what I would like, you're like, okay, well, here's the price. And if they're like, well, that's the price I would like, what am I going to come back tomorrow to sign it? And, if you're with somebody, they're like, I can't make the decision. I'm a new homeowner. It's my first major purchase. I want to talk to XYZ and I can't get a hold of them or whatever. You do the best that you can. And if you can't earn the business, you move on and another team follows up.
When I present to folks, I'll often talk about presenting a good, better, best pricing. Mm-hmm. And I'll often ask the question like, who here can present a price, at the kitchen table or on that first call? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you get a lot of folks that don't raise their hand because they're just not able to do that. Whether it's, they don't know their pricing, they got to go back to the office, they got to write it up, they got to blah, blah, blah. So there's like a lot of limiting factors to why they default to a two-call close because they don't have the efficiencies or the systems or the tech even in place to be able to one-call close. Do you think more people would one-call close if they could?
Yes, it is more convenient. And when you look at companies that do it well, they have really high customer satisfaction scores. I think we're currently averaging like a 94% on Guild Quality in terms of likely to recommend, and we one-call close. And I would say that organization from the setup that you just explained is pretty common. And that's because the owner or the sales leader, they want that single individual to be a salesperson and a project manager. So that is, they probably just need to hire one other person, right? Get somebody in there, get a more simple price guide, have somebody approach the one-call close, and the person that takes them 3 days to come up with a price for a roof, have them do the follow-up.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think they're leaving money on the table. They're not, if I go in there and it takes me 2 days to get back with a price, which I'll raise my hand like I did that 15 years ago, right? And like I would email over the estimate or proposal and be shocked that they didn't sign it. It's like I missed my opportunity. Mm-hmm. I wasn't selling, I was order taking, right? Like there was a lot of things wrong there. And so when I see folks that don't attempt a one-call close, it's often what I find is it's because they're not equipped to be able to. Like they don't have the pricing or whatever it is that to be able to actually execute.
I think that's accurate. And one more point I just want to add in there. Yeah. For the folks that do that, I want them to ask themselves this: does your customer want to wait for the price? Because the answer is no. Right? I don't go look at a house. I'm like, I wonder what the price is, honey. I can't wait to find out in 2 days. Or a car, or even a roof, or like a air conditioning system. I would like to know immediately what it costs.
All right. Chadd, you've entered the round of rapid fire.
Okay.
Beach or lake?
What's that? Beach or lake? Beach. You need the waves.
Chick-fil-A or Popeyes?
Oh, spicy chicken? Popeyes.
All right. Museum or concert?
Concert.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Wine or beer?
IPA.
Oh, off script. East Coast or West Coast?
For what? Living or vacationing?
Very open-ended.
Live on the East Coast, vacation on the West Coast.
All right. Road trip or fly?
Internationally, definitely not the road
Well,
trip.
you're not road tripping internationally.
Yeah.
I take that back unless you're going to Canada.
True. No, I think with family road trip.
All right. Are you a camper or would you rather stay in a hotel?
I will camp if there's a hotel there.
Like camp outside? of
No,
the
I'm just
hotel?
kidding. Hotel.
Okay.
I'm not camping. I'll glamp maybe.
All right. The serious rapid fire questions.
Mm-hmm.
The best salespeople are people who
Don't know that they're great salespeople.
why?
Because they have no bad habits and because the money that they'll make, which they've never made before, will truly be life-changing.
I like it. The fastest growing sales teams are great at
I would say they are great at recruiting their friends and family.
recruitment. I like it. The number one reason somebody's not one call closing is
They're not prepared for it.
process in your roofing business is
Simple, scalable, repeatable.
love it. Automation in your roofing business.
Necessary.
And one prediction for roofing sales in 2024.
I think you'll see a lot more AI on the front and the back end supporting the sales team.
I like it. Pepsi or Coke?
Neither.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Starbucks.
Oh, what about Tim Hortons? You ever had Tim Hortons?
No.
It's a very northern Canadian thing.
Nope.
New York,
Okay.
which is like South Canada.
I don't think people call it that, but
No, they do. Text or call?
what's that?
Text or call?
Text.
All right. Singing or dancing?
Singing. Unless I'm had a few and then dancing.
There we go. Nothing wrong with that. Scrambled or fried eggs?
Fried.
Cat or dog?
Dog.
All right. You passed. Congratulations.
Awesome.
All right. That's it. I appreciate everybody joining us today. Thanks.